All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our online chat. I'm Jonny Dovercourt, and I'm here with Mark Gane and Martha Johnson from Martha and the Muffins. We're here to talk about any night of the week, and there we go. We both got our coffees and Toronto music amidst the pandemic. So, how have you guys been? What have you been spending your time doing since COVID-19?
A lot of things, actually. We have a variety of releases that have come out, and our manager, Graham Stairs, keeps presenting us with possibilities, and we go, sure, we'll try that. So we've had a song relating to the pandemic specifically called Stay Home and Dance. And then we did what are you talking about the other song?
Well, we should just continue on that for a minute. We did a video for that where we used archival footage of this performance thing I did in 1975, where I wrapped my parents' house in wallpaper while they were away on vacation. It was sort of like a Christo influence thing. So we used that in the video with home movie footage. So we did that, and then we have a side project called Chemical Dreams, and we did a collaboration with John Orpheus, who's a songwriter, rapper, singer, multi-instrumentalist, and we did that with him. It's called Look to the Moon. And we're still working with a bunch of younger songwriters, and recently I did an art installation for the Cape Breton Lumiere Arts Festival, where I projected 40 years of phrases extracted from Martha and the Muffins lyrics onto buildings.
Looks great.
Yeah, it just ended this weekend, but it worked really well.
Sorry, where was that?
Cape Breton, Sydney, Nova Scotia, and environs. So it was like the Fortress of Louisbourg, this old church overlooking Sydney Harbor, and this building called a convent, which is now an arts center in downtown Sydney. So there were projections done in those three locations, which I was very happy about. So yeah, I think we've both been busier than normal, which I'm hearing from some people. I think it depends on what your occupation is. Like, we hang out, we record at home, go out to buy groceries once in a while, or when it's safe to walk out there, we might go for a walk. But we're getting a lot of stuff done, and
we haven't played live in years, so that's not something we've lost.
Yeah,
so, I feel very bad for people for bands that can't play anymore.
That's devastating for bands
and the venues.
Yeah, for sure.
And all the musicians who worked in bars and restaurants too, and in the service industry.
Yeah, I think we're only we don't even understand yet how big a blow that is to the cultural, world of Toronto. I mean, people talk about it, but I guess if you were a live musician, man, you'd be feeling it. And our hearts go out to those people for sure.
Yeah, and there's been so many venues that have closed even in the last 6 months. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to write another chapter on the book in the book.
Well, I kind of did, but this is actually, you'll be the first to hear it publicly, but I'm doing a podcast adaptation of Any Night of the Week for the Toronto International Festival of Authors. You heard it here first. So I got to do a bit of an update as to what's been happening in Toronto music venues since the pandemic. Because the concept of the podcast is it's a virtual walking tour of different neighborhoods throughout Toronto. So pointing out different spots. The first one goes along Yonge Street. The second one goes through Yorkville, the Annex, and Kensington Market. And then the third one goes all the way along Queen West from University to Gladstone.
Well, that's fantastic, and congratulations, because it's well deserved. And everything that can be done to widen the exposure to this fantastic book. I mean, it's a really wonderful book. The research was extensive, and you've just shone a light on so many eras and aspects of Toronto's music scenes over the decades. It's
Yeah, I couldn't put it down.
Oh, well, thank
yeah,
you.
we were fighting over it. You know, we should have bought two copies. That's mine.
Well, I'm very touched. So for anyone who hasn't had a chance to read it, Any Night of the Week is out now on Coach House Books, and there's a chapter on Martha and the Muffins. And I got this the last time I think the three of us chat was 3 years ago when I was starting out working on the book. And that was a great conversation. So it's great to reconnect and catch up a bit more. And like I said, for everyone out there, there's a chapter on Martha and the Muffins, and they're definitely, this band is one of the most important bands in Toronto music history, in my opinion, for songs like Echo Beach and albums like This Is the Ice Age and so many more great records from the late 70s through the 80s. But back to the book. So now that you both had a chance to read it over the summer, was there anything else that you found surprising from reading this book?
Well, in the 90s, we were really in another world. So it was great to catch up, like to feel I was educating myself about the bands that existed in the 90s, because I was a void in my life, because we had our daughter was born in 1992, so we entered the world of babies and children and school and all that, and I did a children's album. So our focus was elsewhere, and so I found it very interesting to hear about all these different bands, and I checked out a few of them too.
Yeah, I think that for me was, one of the most interesting decades to read about, because, well, first of all, we thank you for including this in the book, but we know all about Martha and the Muffins. So it was more, and, we had certainly growing up in the 60s, we had that, the exposure of that decade in the 70s. But as Martha says, well, I wouldn't have characterized it as a void. Our daughter will not want to hear that. She'll go, "Oh, so like I was a void in your life?" No, no, but no, I know. I'm only joking. It's okay. It's okay. We've been together too long. No, but it was an era where we went totally domestic, and so there were bands like Broken Social Scene that were you'd hear about, because obviously they were becoming really well known and successful. But I didn't really know much about the music. And so when I was reading it, I started making a list, which I haven't completed. But I was, Broken Social Scene was on there, and G was on there. And particularly sort of the weird improviser bands, because...
Yeah, we listened to some of them.
Yeah, we were checking them out. And, when I listened to You Forgot It in People, which I wasn't familiar with, and it's embarrassing to admit that, but I was listening to it and going, this album is phenomenal, and it deserved all the recognition it got. It's a landmark record, and I'm looking forward to checking out like a lot of the other ones that I'm writing down on my list, because there's just a.
There's one I was really interested in.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Do make say think. Yeah.
I listened to some of their stuff. I really liked it.
Because for me, like I've been doing improvised music, like this is something that maybe people don't know, but since I was about 18 or 19. Mm-hmm. So like all those bands that were kind of in that area, really interest me, and I'm looking forward to like listening more about what they were all doing at that time. And of course, hopefully that'll bring me up to the present as well.
It's also great that you included so many bands that didn't necessarily go on to any fame or fortune or recognition outside of the city or Canada, because they were just as important as informing the scene and influencing other bands and being influenced by other bands. So it's all interconnected. So it was good to see that a lot of the smaller, less significant or less visual bands were included.
Well, I think that goes to show, and we're certainly aware of this, how much luck plays into everything. I mean, you documented our story of how our sax players sent, a cassette tape down to Andy Warhol's Interview magazine in New York. I mean, as every band knows that has ended up with a recording career or has gone on to some measure of success, you look back on it, you go, if any one of those things didn't happen, none of it would have happened. And, there are bands there that in the book that obviously deserved, much more than they got for whatever reason, like the luck and you know, and but they're all worthy of mention. And without those bands, you know, all it would have been would have be a book about the success, the big success stories, which is not really what your aim was, right?
I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure, please.
Was that why you stopped in 2001? Was that because the internet influenced everything so much?
That was it sort of retroactively that's became a reason, but there was a few initially I was planning to do something that was going to go up to more recently. Originally it was going to go up to 2015, and it just became too large. So and so I basically had to tell my publisher, I think this has to be 2 books. Like I have to split it into 2 because so much has happened since 2000. In terms of the number of Toronto bands that broke out of the city, it just increased so much more after 2000. So that was one reason. And then another one was I liked the sort of at the end of 2001, you had this big in the local scene, you had this big dramatic thing happen with the Alma Combo and Ted's Wrecking Yard, where they both closed down within a few months of each other. And even that was sort of in a few weeks after 9/11. So it was a very just sort of like apocalyptic atmosphere. So it kind of, you know, the idea of this being a first book, it kind of made it end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So
it does, yeah,
and the century changed.
And you know, when it's adapted to television, like that's going to be a wild closing episode.
We'll see about that, but yeah. So that was one reason, and then yeah, the more I thought about it, the internet really did change things, and you can start to see the sort of beginnings of that happening at the end of the book, because it's not, obviously 2001 isn't strictly pre-internet, but it's definitely pre-social media. You know, because when we were starting the Wavelength series in 99, 2000, it was the first time we'd organized something over email. You know, like the first time that my friends and I had all started like a big CC'd email thread, and that the internet was starting to play into promotion, and Napster had started in 1999. So streaming was just, or downloading, I guess, was just starting to happen. So you could just see things starting to change. But it was still prior to Friendster and Facebook and MySpace, and social media really, really changed things. So it put so much power in the hands of the artists that hadn't been there before.
I think it's incredible that when we started out in 1977, there weren't really any videos.
No.
I mean, that was.
It was in its infancy.
And you go from that to where we are now.
Yeah.
You know.
So I was wondering, in terms of like back to the 90s, was there anything that you felt a sort of a connection to, or did you identify with the struggles of the bands that you read about in the 90s compared to maybe not so much the struggles that you faced, but maybe the other people from your generation of artists faced?
Well, there's common ground, I think, with any band or artist, I think, because some of those things never change.
Yeah.
Common problems.
And there's common problems. I mean, certainly, like, yeah, all the inter-band stuff, but I'm thinking more like the opportunities that happened by the 90s that just simply didn't exist for bands like us. And I remember thinking, we were living in England in the late 90s. We came back in late 89, and I remember.
You said the late 90s.
Oh, I mean,
late 80s.
We were there in the late 80s, but when we came back in 89, I remember thinking a lot had changed. Like suddenly I was going, wow, these bands are cool. Like all of a sudden there were cool bands and they were getting noticed. And I remember we were shooting a video with Curtis Weirfritz, who was a big video director at the time. And he was talking about going down to this club to see the Tragically Hip, you know, and I thought suddenly there seemed to be bands that wouldn't have got any recognition at all 10, 15, 20 years earlier, that now there was a platform, and you would know better what those platforms were, but of course one of them was Much Music, which had a huge huge influence on boosting. But I think one of the ongoing things throughout the whole book that I was, noticing and lamenting to some degree was that Toronto seems to be like a modern form of Sparta, in that, and we used to talk about this in the 80s, how, when we were trying to get more recognition from Canada, it's like Toronto is all about money and sports. And that's why I make the Sparta connection. And you're kind of going, well, that's all great. We all like money and we all like sports. But that seemed to be, certainly throughout the 70s and 80s, that was still like the huge emphasis, the emphasis culture, or civically, I think. So everything else seemed to be kind of a struggle. And when I read about Peaches, and I got the quote here because I thought it was so, it was like that then, it was like that when Peaches went to Berlin, and it's still like that. And she said, if they like me there, meaning Berlin, Canada will like me more. And I thought, man, and that was like 2000, I think March 2000. And I went, that, like, nothing, in some respects, nothing has changed in 20 years, because that was so spot on. And in terms of our career, every time something happened somewhere else, we suddenly got like a headline in the Toronto Star again, or, everybody go, oh, black stations, white stations, they're back. And you're going, well, we're from here. We never went away, but, it took somewhere else to legitimize what we were doing. And I thought what Peaches said was the fact that it was still, relevant to people, and going, I've had enough of this, I'm going to Berlin. I thought was very true. And I think, that aspect of the town is frustrating,
Well, the show Schitt's Creek is kind of an example of that. It's so popular now because it's become popular around the world. Our friends in England, in the conversation, they say, "Oh, we're watching Schitt's Creek. It's great."
I really love, and just as an aside, I really love Schitt's Creek. It's a brilliant show.
No, I do too.
But what's funny about it is that it's Canadian in feel, but there's no identification that it's set in Canada. They don't.
I was saying that to Martha, and I think, in fact, because like we're binge watching it now, like we're watching 5 in a row, but there are like weird references to
taking a drive up the coast, which makes you think, oh, maybe it's California.
Yeah, I know exactly.
But yeah, no, I noticed that, and I think were they to do it now, there might be more a willingness to go, this is where we are, this is what it is.
But I think it's good that they didn't do that, because the characters in the show, they could just write it off as that rural backwards Canada, that country, because
the hoser thing,
and it wasn't like it. If you put it anywhere in the world, anywhere in North America, I mean, it's limited by the foliage and all that, I know. Yeah. But I think that you don't, people can't poke fun at Canadians.
I think that's the thing too, and I think that also if it was identified as Canadian, it just might turn off an American audience who just, for whatever reason, they just think they can't relate to it. Canada isn't cool, but it's just sort of like it's sort of blandly North American by design. So that it could be.
No, those are good points, actually.
It's like women writing a book and calling it their name, M. Johnson, instead of using the Martha. Like, you read it just without a gender.
Yeah, those are good points. I stand corrected.
But I watched all 6 seasons, and I said they never mentioned the name Toronto once, like not once. And I was like, oh, why are we always there? This is like our biggest success, and we're erased,
Yeah, and that's a city,
And we're known for comedy.
We have a sense of irony that the Americans don't have at all. Like, there's a lot of irony in our humor, which I think comes from the British influence.
Yeah.
The Americans, maybe less so now, but certainly traditionally, America does not have irony in their humor. And maybe it's because Canadians are observational, like we're always looking at what that huge behemoth to the south is doing, and there's a certain sense of irony and satire and
Yeah.
self-righteous judgment maybe, but
Just going back to something you were saying earlier about the Peaches quote, and if they love me, if they love me in Berlin, they'll love me more in Canada. Do you think that that's true kind of everywhere, except maybe the big New York and LA? Like, is it the case where if even a British band, it gets more love back home if they make it in the States?
Yeah, that they do.
yes, to a certain degree, but not to the degree that we suffer from.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of it is just the size of the country with a tiny population.
Next to the state.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're a band from Huddersfield, Yorkshire,
Yeah.
and suddenly you're huge in the US, that's got to count for something.
Yeah.
But those centers, LA, New York, London, they exist entirely under their own energy and sphere. So, it's less so for them perhaps. But
The thing that's funny with our situation was that we were big everywhere except the States.
Yeah.
And that's the neighbor.
yeah, that was
we weren't
a peculiar
we were
thing.
sort of cultish, but other countries, like people heard Echo Beach played on the Nile, and they were floating down the Nile and stuff like that. All sorts of places all over the world, but it was hard to find it in the States.
Well, that's one of those inverse luck things where Virgin pulled out of the States and handed the catalog to Atlantic.
But it would have changed our lives.
Yeah, it would have been a huge change, but it didn't happen, and that's one of those circumstantial things you have no control over.
So you got to get Echo Beach onto American sitcom soundtrack if it's not already.
Yeah, that would be good. There's lots of possibilities there.
I guess back at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was wandering around good old Queen Street, the eastern end of Queen Street, coming down McCall Street, I saw your faces painted on a city utility box.
Yes.
How do you feel about the muralization and memorialization of Martha and the Muffins in that context?
It's a great location because that's where it all happened.
Yeah, literally that phone box, and Julie McMillan did that, and she did a great job. And she really researched it. We had a lot of conversations. And she said, I want as much archival material as you can send me. I need stuff to work with. And so we're really happy with what she did. And the location is really interesting because if you had a slingshot, let's say, and you aimed it over to St. Patrick, you basically hit number 4 St. Patrick, which was our rehearsal space, along with Johnny and the G-Rays and a few other people. And a bit north of that would have been the original music gallery. Mm. And if you swiveled over to the west, you'd whack the Beverly Tavern, which of course was where we first started. And if you faced north and sent a stone that way, you would hit the old Brinks building, except it doesn't exist anymore. But it came down like a year and a half or 2 ago. And that was the rehearsal space for the Diodes. We played there. It was the sound lab of the Ontario College of Art, where so many...
You started Echo Beach there.
Well, that's right. The earliest recording of Echo Beach was done in that building. And that's where a fellow student asked me to start a band. So it was a hub of all the experimental arts activity. So that box is really literally the epicenter of all those activities. Now, would we have preferred a huge, grandiose monument with up lights at night and stuff? Sure, but but no, it's great, and I was glad to see that finally people were understanding the historical importance of all the bands that started there.
Yeah, it was a great time for music, for just having fun.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, thinking about that area, about that in the late 70s, about that area around Queen and McCall, you just walking around that area, there's so much concentrated musical history. There's OCA and the Bev, Crash and Burn, 3 different locations of the music gallery within walking distance of each other. Can you imagine somewhere like that, an area like that happening today?
Not at all, because the big factor in all that that generated that activity was the availability of cheap space. And, you know, it was like that in Toronto. It was certainly like that in the Bowery, you know, in New York. Without cheap space, people who are creative but not, you know, monetarily able to rent bigger spaces, that's what drives creative activity, is that you had space. And certainly OCA had the Brinks building, which was called the Annex at that time, but it was a huge open space for the most part, and all sorts of stuff happened there. You had the music gallery, which was renting a hall that is now where Village by the Grange is. You had number 4 St. Patrick, which was apparently the former stables for the Rex.
Oh yeah.
It had this little tiny window in the back that I think horses looked out of that was there. And it was freezing in the winter, but you had space, and it wasn't expensive. And people, I mean, we were living on, I think, about $3,000 a year. I mean, it sounds like, you know, the Neolithic era, but yeah, pioneer days. But you could do that then, and you could, and that gave all the intersections with the artists and the musicians and you know, entrepreneurial business people. The availability of cheap space kind of was the fuel for the fire, I think.
So Echo Beach, the song, has lent its name to a venue in Toronto. And I recently told some younger artists about Martha and the Muffins, and they were blown away because they didn't know, they only knew the venue. They didn't know the song, and they thought it was amazing that the venue referenced the song. So how do you feel about that memorialization of your musical history?
Well, it has certain ironies about it, because the Live Nation never seemed to want to acknowledge that it was Martha and Muffins. All the media did. They did.
And they also attached the bank logo and association with the song title. You know, it was like RBC.
TD
Echo Beach or something, I think it was.
Yeah, TD and then RBC.
And when we went from one bank to another bank, we did contact them, and there has been some action on that.
Yeah, we had a little discussion about how we were growing increasingly uncomfortable with everybody was latching on to this except us. And so we really can't go into many details about it, but we did in the end get some compensation, because we said, you know, the banks are happy to jump on this, and everybody's got their name attached to this. And, you know,
Live Nation was doing well.
Yeah, Live Nation was doing pretty well. And there was a connection with Live Nation because Arthur Fogel, who's one of the CEOs there in charge of like the live touring end of it, was our former tour manager in Canada.
Yeah.
So, you know, we had to have a little discussion about that.
And a friend.
Yeah, and, you know, we were friends. So it all worked out. Ironically, you know, when we talk about how Canada is always at the end of things in terms of recognition, it's honoring, you know, there was a sense of being honored with that, considering that Echo Beach, the second verse is written literally about a quarter mile from the venue. But, you know, having said that, I mean, there are literally 40 years worth of place names around the world that Echo Beach has lent its name to. And we were always going, you know, not that it really bothered us, because it's not the kind of thing that would bother us, but we're going, I wonder if Canada's ever going to name something after that. And it eventually happened, but, you know, there's been a lot of things from Zanzibar to Bali to Germany.
What's the recent thing? A wine, isn't it?
Yeah, we just found a wine from Papua New Guinea called, it's a Sauvignon Blanc called Echo Beach. Yeah, I don't know what it's like.
We should get a case.
I think the manager said maybe they'll give you a case. You know, like.
And Echo Beach, the venue, is down on the waterfront at Ontario Place, and I believe there was a very memorable Martha and the Muffins show at the Ontario Place Forum. It was in 1983. Is that right?
It's interesting you mention that because we transferred, okay, I'll back up a bit. We recorded that gig.
Mm-hmm.
Anne Lanois, who was, we were co-producing with at the time, did the live recording off of a mobile. And for years, those tapes were lost. And then they were found. They were found in our former manager's mother's. She passed away, and he dug the tapes out of her bedroom closet in her house. So somehow
That was Jerry Young.
That was Jerry Young. So his mom, for some reason, had the tapes at her house. And then for years, they just sat in our bedroom, basically. And recently, we got them transferred. And as of today, I was listening to the tracks because I just got them from Peter Moore, who transferred them. And so we're going to release that at some point.
Excellent.
It's quite exciting. Like the band played everything way too fast.
Yeah, really fast.
But it sounds crazy in a great way.
Yeah.
So, we're looking forward to putting that.
It was a great band too.
It was a great band, yeah.
The core band, and then Michael Brook and Wayne Wales
and Kwame. Yeah, it was.
It was a really good band.
And Kwame is the percussionist for Truths and Rights, isn't that right?
That's right, yeah. And he was so great. And then, we had the core rhythm section of Nick Kent and Jocelyn Lanois. It was just a really cool band to be touring with. But yeah, that area of the waterfront, like the Ontario Place, the writing of the song, the naming of the new venue, the Metro Music cover that had like an aerial shot of the whole downtown section. Like we were never embarrassed about being from Canada. Like when we first went over to the UK, we got all that. It's hard to believe now, but they were the music press was full of all of those sort of. It was a combination of curiosity and condescension, because we weren't like a rock band. We weren't folk artists. We weren't country music. We had this, like, our first single there was Insect Love. And they were going, oh, this odd band with two Marthas and, from the colonies. Like the colonies kept coming up, right? As if we were still the colony. But, we didn't pretend to be other than what we were, which meant that Metro Music had this map of Toronto on the cover, and that sparked a lot of interest. And, we tried our best, maybe unconsciously, to be ambassadors for Canada, or we were by default, I think, actually.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's some parallels with the bands that came out of Athens, Georgia. There's a book that came out this summer earlier this year called Cool Town by an author called Grace Elizabeth Hale that's documents the history of the Athens scene, starting with the B-52s and going through REM and Pylon and those other great bands. And the bands from Athens sort of dealt with that a bit, of the sort of, curiosity and condescension of being from the South. But I think it'll maybe work more to their advantage, because I think that there is a bit more of a sort of romantic allure of being from the deep South, especially when they went up to New York or to the northeastern states. So it's
and if you've ever been down there, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to like Savannah.
I have.
It's a weird place down there. So there is sort of an exotic aspect to it, even if you were, from the the more northern states. The Deep South has this weird vibe, and they would have certainly been. I mean, when we first saw them, which might have been the Horseshoe. I mean, I know we played with the B-52s at the music hall, but did they? You might know this. Did they play before that?
I think they played the Edge. I think they played the Horseshoe first, and then they played the Edge.
Okay, because I think I seem to remember seeing them at the Horseshoe, maybe.
Yeah.
And there was something about them. I mean, they were weird enough to begin with, but the fact that they were from Athens, Georgia, definitely added like another layer of.
Well, there was a parallel between the two bands, between them and us, Martha and the Muffins. There were two singers, two women out front, singing, and the quirky lyrics and funny stuff. The humorous edge to the music as well.
I did a Zoom chat with the author of Cool Town and
Yep.
played some Martha and the Muffins for the audience to illustrate the parallels a little bit. So
Yeah, I listened to that podcast.
oh yeah.
Yeah, we were
Yeah, it was
tuned
good.
in. It was good.
That's right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, we're on it, Johnny. We're on it.
Oh, I'm impressed and touched. So, but I wanted to talk a bit about the Ontario Place Forum because a lot of younger people, weren't around for that amazing venue, and I was, I guess old enough that I got to see some concerts there when I was in my teens and before it was demolished. But can you describe that venue and what made it special for anyone who might not have been around for it?
Well, I can't remember the capacity, but it was quite large and it was free.
Mm-hmm.
And people would sit on the hillside on the grass on the hillside, and the stage you had the band had the choice of it staying still or spinning.
Yeah,
revolving stage. Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't have it turned, did we?
No, we chose to have it stationary. I can't remember the rationale for that.
Well, maybe because I get motion sickness.
Oh yeah, Martha got.
I got motion sickness on the Captain John's restaurant in the harbor, and also at the top of the CN Tower when it was foggy.
Yeah, you went up there for a birthday and you got dizzy or something.
Yeah, my 30th birthday.
So that might have been it, but it was a beautiful. The situation was so beautiful, and the bowl was grass, right? I think there were seats, and then it turned into grass. So there was a whole pile of
there was a
bleachers, kind of, and then a large amount of grass at the top of the rim.
Yeah, it was a big stage too, because we were a big band. We were quite spread out.
It was good that way, and of course, it'd always be kind of this breeze coming in from the lake. And as you said, it was free. So part of our social democracy was that people could go with the admission to Ontario Place, and they could see a show at the Forum.
And they had really good artists come in.
Yeah, they had good.
Top line. They had the ballet and symphony and everything.
And it was one of those things, again, going back to the Sparta comparison.
Yeah.
That the Forum would be a big draw now. Because of its unique characteristics and the sort of romanticism that the architecture had.
Yeah.
And instead they built this box, this big ugly box. And frankly, the few times that I'd been there, I thought the sound has been pretty crappy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all about economics, because I know when we played there, we got 10,000 plus at the Forum, and I'm sure whatever the newer venue is, it's probably like twice that, maybe more. But man, it has none of the feel of the Forum. That was a beautiful place to play, and I'm glad we were able to do that.
And the sun going down and everything.
Yeah.
Very romantic kind of.
And I learned something. I didn't know that it was an option to have the stage revolve or not, because I only ever saw it revolving.
Oh, okay. Well, those artists that you saw clearly didn't get vertigo,
I think I saw Blue Rodeo and the Cowboy Junkies. That's sort of more my era.
Yeah.
But, and nobody was like off stage throwing up or anything.
No, and there was no riots like Teenage Head.
Yeah, right.
So looking back on your discography, do you each have a favorite album that stands out from all the others?
I think This Is the Ice Age, probably, because it was a change. It was a change of producers, and it was just a very, very creative album to make. It was exciting every day, and we were doing a lot of experimentation. It was a lot of fun. We just tried a lot of different things. I think it was freeing to not have the thumb of the record company watching us doing. We weren't in England anymore. We were in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's like parts of albums that you like and certain individual songs, but I would agree. I mean, Ice Age certainly held together, I think, as a whole album. I'd say Dance Park as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then for other more nostalgic reasons, Metro Music, the first album too, just because it's a snapshot of a really young band going into the studio for the first time, and the excitement of making songs that you might have written without any idea that they'd ever be recorded. Suddenly you were there and you were recording them, and plus Echo Beach being on that album, the way the whole thing just exploded when that came out. But I think out of all of them, yeah, Ice Age would be, it was just such a revelation to be working, with this young engineer, Dan Lanois, who was an unknown at that time, but clearly, and he got some good breaks that helped take him up to the next levels. But even then it was clear that he was something special. And again, it's that luck thing where if a fellow former student friend of mine from OCA hadn't been working in a restaurant with another woman who was a bass player who happened to be Jocelyn Lanois, and she said, and we were looking for a new bass player, and she said, "Oh well, I know somebody who works at this cafe. She plays bass." And then Jocelyn said, "I have a brother who has a studio in Hamilton." I mean, again, all those things just fell together, and we ended up doing 3 albums with him. And it was just such a great experience working with him. He was like George Martin was to the Beatles. Like, he was our George Martin. You go, "Can we try this?" You go, "Yeah, sure, we'll do that." And, in the previous 2 albums, if we wanted to do anything strange, which would normally have come from me or Andy Hawes, the sax player, you kind of get those, maybe they weren't that blatant about it, but you kind of get the implied raised eyebrows and, oh God, Mark's going to drag his, synthy A out again and make some bird noises or some damn thing. But Dan was totally into it, it was great.
And you made those 3 albums with them, or was there more?
Yeah, we did Ice Age, Dance Park, and Mystery Walk, which had black stations, white stations on it too.
And are you still in touch with Dan Lanois these days?
We haven't seen him for a long time. Like, the last time we saw him was at the 2010 Nuit Blanche, because he was doing a big thing at the City Hall, and I and Charlie Roby were doing an installation east of Yonge in an office building. So we went over to see what he was doing, and that was the last time. We haven't seen him for a while.
So we're coming up to an hour soon, but it's got a couple of and then Zoom is going to kick us off. But so I got a couple of final questions. When I interviewed you in 2017, you mentioned that Leonard Neverez was working on a book about the band. Is that still? Is there any updates on that front?
He's still working on it, and periodically we'll get emails with more questions and stuff. And he's now the Muffins expert. He knows more about the Muffins than we do.
And he became very interested in the Thornhill influence. And he interviewed a lot of my friends from my high school days who were involved in music in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s.
He has an extensive chart of all the Thornhill bands, and he wrote a really interesting blog about how the Thornhill bands were the trigger that started the whole Queen Street thing, which could be argued by a lot of people, but he made a very compelling case. And I thought, man, it takes like a professor from upstate New York to write about this, right? And it didn't get, I think it deserved, that whole theory and his writing on that, apart from us and the Muffins, but that idea, should have got wider exposure here. I mean, because it's a Canadian cultural thing, but it took an American to write about it, which none of us should be surprised about. But yeah, short answer, yes, he's still working on it. I imagine like maybe next year it'll come out, but who knows?
The Thornhill thing was really fascinating when someone first sent me that blog when I was early on working in the book, and it totally blew my mind. And I just, yeah, I hadn't seen anything like that. That sort of level of detail of going into the backstories of suburban Toronto high schools to sort of chart. And you could do that for a lot of different music scenes, I think, or eras of the music scene. What's interesting is there was also Thornhill Collegiate came up again later in the book, because some of the guys from the Van Fleck camp and the artist Hayden and a few other people and Vitavine Wright all went to Thornhill Collegiate around the same time. And
yes, and exactly, and Leonard had a lot to say about the sociological and environmental backgrounds that why the suburbs created that atmosphere that would, you know, eventually pull all these people together, and then they would migrate downtown. I mean, it's almost like it could be a book in itself.
Well, music is so much a part of a teenager's life. It was mine, and most of the people I know, you know, they had their favorite bands and posters, and you know, went down to see bands in the city. You know, I lived in Thornhill, but it was I saw some great bands in Toronto at festivals and stuff.
So if anyone listening wants to check it out, I believe the blog is called Musical Urbanism.
Yes.
Leonard's blog. It's definitely, if you wanted to really go deep and learn more about the early history of Martha and the Muffins and the Thornhill scene that preceded them, that's where to find out. So I guess my big question is, we talked about this at the end of the interview in 2017. Do you think the original band will ever get back together?
No.
I know you ended the chapter on this hopeful note. I mean, you've got health concerns, which would, I mean, Martha, as you know, has Parkinson's, so that rules out, you know, any kind of live playing.
We did that tribute in, was that 2013? It was a tribute that Hill,
the music.
Our friend Hill Kirkudis put together.
Oh, right, yeah.
At the Rivoli, and I did a couple of songs, and that sort of decided me that I wasn't going to be doing any live singing anymore, because it's just I can't count on my body to do what my mind wants it to do. There's a battle.
But I also think even if your health was good, Martha, we'd probably be playing, and there might be some people from that era, but it probably would have been, you know, like King Crimson and a whole pile of people from the different eras of the band. You know, and we might have had like 20 people and 3 drummers or something, but
I'm just happy that music is still a part of my life. I'm still able to write and record things, and you know, it's just different.
Yeah, the activity.
You adapt,
and the activity is as intense. It's just that there's no live component, but you know, but it's not as though you're not doing tons of different stuff.
Yeah, so. No, I'm very busy.
Well, none of us are able to play live right now anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's a real level playing field.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe there'll be do you think there'll be some sort of Martha and the Muffins new activity, even maybe in an online sphere that people can look forward to?
Well, we've got a number of songs that we want to put together for an EP or an album, just to have it, you know, just because we've got these songs that we think are really good. And we know the audience is small, but you know, we still have the desire to express ourselves and communicate with people.
Well, you've been working really hard. She's got the germs of like, I don't know, 6 to 8 songs, and they're great. You know, so I think an EP or an album is in order for sure.
Probably come out next year.
Maybe next year or the year after, but we work really slow. I mean, and we're running out of time. I don't know.
Everybody's running out of time.
Next year is the 40th anniversary of This is the Ice Age as well.
That's right, yeah, and we're still trying to get Universal Canada interested in that, because we are working on a reissue of Metro Music, a double disc with really rare stuff stuff that was recorded in the Sound Lab at OCA in 1978, stuff from the Beverly, things like that. So that's in the works, and I'm hoping that will encourage the label to do Ice Age, because a lot of people want to see that out again, especially if there's another disc of like extra material too.
Fantastic. And so in the meantime, people can check out Stay at Home and Dance.
Stay home and dance. Yeah, like check out our YouTube channel. There's lots of stuff up there.
Great. Well, anything else you guys want to add before we sign off?
Just thank you, Johnny. Thank
Yeah,
you for everything you've
yeah,
done.
Thanks for putting us in the book.
And, you know, hopefully you'll be doing volume 2.
Hopefully. Thanks so much, Martha and Mark, and for your kind words and all your support and amazing music over the years. And it was great to speak with you both.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care.